Don't touch that! That violin costs more than your yearly paycheck.
The words snapped through the lobby, sharp enough to cut the low murmur of marble and heels. Someone laughed. Someone else sighed like this was already an inconvenience. The janitor had only bent down because the case had tipped, because the instrument inside was about to hit stone. Security's hand hovered near his shoulder. Executives paused mid-stride, watching a man in worn gloves reach for something that clearly didn't belong to him. He didn't pull back. Instead, he lifted the violin carefully, like it was breathing. He checked the bridge, the strings, the scroll, habits older than this building. When he drew the bow across the strings, the sound wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It slid through the lobby, soft and aching, the kind of melody that made people forget where they were for half a second. Across the room, the woman stepping out of the private elevator froze. Her heel didn't come down. Her hand stayed curled around her phone. Her face drained of color as the melody reached a specific phrase, one that shouldn't exist here, one she hadn't heard since a sealed room and a signed document ended a career years ago. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Because what was happening wasn't about a janitor touching a violin. It was about a song that remembered everything. And before anyone understood why the CEO of a glass tower had stopped breathing, the music kept going. He finished the phrase, lowered the bow, and only then seemed to notice the silence. His eyes lifted, calm, unreadable. Around him, the lobby felt different, like the air had shifted. This wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. He set the violin gently back into its case and straightened. The snapback came quietly. He adjusted the strap of his cleaning cart, nodded once to security, and returned to his work without apology. No trembling hands. No rush. Just a man who'd done what needed doing and knew when to step away. People didn't know what to do with that. A few feet away, his daughter sat on a bench meant for visitors, sneakers swinging just above the floor. She'd been doing homework, pencil paused mid-problem when the music started. Now she stared at him with wide eyes, something like relief loosening her shoulders. Music always did that for her. It was the only thing that slowed the tight breathing, the way her fingers sometimes dug into her sleeves. He met her gaze and gave the smallest smile. "You're okay. I'm here." That was the real reason he'd played. The woman by the elevator recovered first. Power did that. She masked the moment, straightened her spine, and scanned the lobby like it owed her an explanation. Her gaze landed on the janitor's back, then on the violin case, then flicked away as if none of it mattered. "Who left that instrument unattended?" she asked, voice smooth, clipped, already irritated. No one answered right away. People were still recalibrating, still shaking off the feeling that they'd almost witnessed something important. He pushed his cart toward the service corridor, the wheels squeaking softly. The smell of polish followed him, lemon and chemical, grounding. This was where he belonged, according to everyone else. Behind glass. Behind doors marked authorized personnel only. His daughter gathered her things quickly and followed, slipping into step beside him. The corridor swallowed the noise of the lobby, replacing it with the hum of vents and distant elevators. She looked up at him like she wanted to ask 100 questions and didn't know which one was safe. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said before she could speak. "I know," she replied, small but certain. "You always fix things before they break." That landed deeper than she meant it to. He stopped near the supply closet, crouched to her level, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The promise he'd made himself years ago tightened in his chest. Keep her steady. Keep her believing the world wasn't only sharp edges and closed doors. Behind them, the lobby buzz returned, louder now. Voices layered over each other. Someone laughed too hard. Someone else whispered the CEO's name like a prayer or a curse. The song still lingered, though. It clung to the walls, to the marble, to the people who'd heard it whether they wanted to or not. In the executive elevator, the woman stared at her reflection as the doors closed. Her pulse hadn't slowed. The melody replayed in her head, each note dragging up a memory she'd paid to erase. Down in the service corridor, he picked up his mop again, hands steady, mind already moving forward. He didn't know why the woman had frozen. He didn't need to. All he knew was that the violin had fallen and he'd caught it. And somewhere between the marble floor and the last note, Something long buried had started to surface. The corridor door eased shut behind them, sealing in the hum and the smell of cleanser. He pushed the cart forward, wheels complaining, until the noise of the lobby thinned into distance. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the echo of the violin still hanging between concrete walls and exposed pipes. He parked beside the supply cage and checked the lock out of habit. His hands moved with practiced economy, wringing cloths, lining bottles, grounding himself in routine. The girl leaned against the wall, watching him like she always did when her chest felt tight, counting his movements without realizing it. "You're shaking," she said quietly. He stilled, then smiled like it was nothing. "Just cold in here." It wasn't true, but it was easier than explaining memory. He slipped off one glove and pressed his palm flat to the wall, feeling the vibration of elevators climbing. Above them, money moved. Deals happened. Down here, time moved slower, measured in shifts and lunch breaks and the weight of a backpack on a small shoulder. A radio crackled somewhere deeper in the corridor. Voices overlapped, excited, confused. He caught fragments as he worked. The CEO had stopped mid-step. Someone recognized the song. Security was asking questions that didn't have answers yet. He kept his head down. This job had rules, most of them unspoken. Don't draw attention. Don't linger where you're not supposed to be. Don't remind people you exist unless they need something cleaned up. He'd learned those rules fast after everything else fell apart. The girl slid down the wall to sit on the floor, knees tucked in. He noticed the way her fingers twisted the strap of her bag and reached into his pocket without looking. The metronome keychain brushed his knuckles, metal cool and familiar. He set it beside her, ticking softly once he wound it. Her breathing matched it within seconds. That was the other thing people never saw. The way music wasn't about applause or stages anymore. It was about survival. About keeping one small person steady in a world that didn't slow down for anyone. A pair of shoes passed the corridor entrance. Expensive, impatient. The voice that followed was sharper than before, clipped with control. Orders were being given. The building was rearranging itself around one woman's unease. He finished the row, capped the bottle, and wiped his hands on his pants. The cart looked the same as it always did. So did he. That mattered. If you're still with me, subscribe and turn the bell on, because what's unfolding here isn't just about a song, it's about how the truth finds its way back. He nudged the cart forward again, guiding it toward the service elevator. The girl stood, slinging her bag over one shoulder, metronome still ticking in her palm. She didn't ask if they were leaving. She trusted he'd know when it was time. Inside the elevator, the lights flickered once before settling. The doors slid shut with a soft thud, enclosing them in steel. The numbers lit up, descending. His reflection stared back at him, older than he felt, eyes carrying too many rooms and too much sound. He thought of the violin in the lobby, of the way the melody had slipped out before he could stop it. He'd told himself he was done with that life. Done with stages, contracts, donors who smiled while sharpening knives. He'd walked away to protect something smaller, more fragile. But the song hadn't asked permission. The elevator slowed, then stopped with a jolt. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the doors opened onto the loading level, cooler air rushing in. Forklifts beeped. A truck idled, diesel heavy. This was another world entirely, all motion and muscle. As they stepped out, a supervisor glanced over, eyes narrowing. "You okay?" he asked, more curious than concerned. "Yeah," he said easily. "Just finishing up." The man shrugged and turned back to his clipboard. That was the balance he maintained. Useful, forgettable, necessary but unseen. Upstairs, a meeting was being called that no one had planned for. Emails were flying. Names were being searched. A sealed memory had cracked open, and the building felt it even down here. He guided the cart into its spot and checked his watch. Still time before pickup. He crouched again in front of the girl, straightening her jacket, smoothing a wrinkle like it mattered. "Did I do something bad?" she asked, eyes searching his face. "No," he said, firm and gentle. "You saw someone catch something before it broke. That's all." She nodded, satisfied. The metronome clicked on, steady as a heart. Above them, the first consequences were already forming, though neither of them knew how loud they would be. For now, there was just work to finish, a child to protect, and a truth that had finally remembered how to sing. The loading level stayed busy long after they blended back into it, the rhythm of labor swallowing small disturbances without comment. He wiped down the cart handles, listening to the metronome tick slow and steady in his daughter's hand. Above them, the building exhaled, unaware that its pulse had changed. Several floors up, the woman stood alone in her office, palms braced against the glass. Maribel Klein watched the city stretch beneath her, sunlight catching on steel and ambition. From here, everything looked orderly, obedient, owned. She'd built her life to feel like this, elevated, untouchable. The meeting she'd just cut short still buzzed on her screen, unread messages stacking like accusations she wasn't ready to read. The song replayed again. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple, jaw tight. It was impossible. That composition had been locked away with the rest of it. Contracts signed, narratives rewritten, a man's name quietly erased from programs and press releases. She'd paid for that silence, protected the brand, protected herself. And yet, there it was, in her lobby, played by a janitor. "No!" she muttered, pushing away from the glass. Her heels clicked sharp and fast across the floor as she reached for her phone. She scrolled, searching archives she hadn't touched in years, eyes narrowing as files surfaced. Dates. Donors. A benefit gala, meant to buy goodwill and bury dissent. The melody matched. Every note. A knock sounded at the door, tentative but persistent. She straightened, smoothed her jacket, and called out permission like nothing was wrong. Ruth Calder stepped in, tablet tucked to her chest, expression carefully neutral. "Security flagged an incident downstairs," Ruth said. "Nothing serious. Just. Unusual?" Maribel lifted an eyebrow. "Unusual how?" There was a violin. Someone played it. Several people recognized the piece. "That's impossible," Maribel said too quickly. She caught it, softened her tone. "It's a corporate building, Ruth, not a concert hall." "I know," Ruth replied evenly. "That's why people are talking." Maribel waved a dismissive hand. "Handle it. And make sure the instrument's returned to its owner. I don't want distractions before tonight's event." Ruth hesitated, eyes flicking up, then back down. Of course. When the door closed again, Maribel's composure cracked. She sank into her chair, fingers gripping the armrests as the past surged forward. She remembered the meeting where she'd smiled and nodded, promising support while quietly withdrawing funding. Remembered how easy it had been to let the board believe the artist was unstable, difficult, not worth the risk. Necessary losses, she'd told herself. Her screen chimed. Another message. This one from facilities asking if the lobby violin had been claimed. She stared at it, then typed a single word. Yes. Down below, the supervisor finished his clipboard checks and waved the forklift through. He didn't notice the way the girl's metronome slowed as her shoulders relaxed, or how the man leaned against a pillar, eyes briefly closed. Small moments didn't register here, only output. The service elevator dinged somewhere behind them, doors opening, voices spilling out. 2 employees stepped off, still buzzing from upstairs. One laughed, shaking his head. "I swear I've never seen her like that," he said. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. His companion snorted. "Probably just stress. Big donors tonight." They moved on, conversation fading. The man's eyes followed them for a second, then returned to the floor. He felt the pull of something unresolved, like a string left vibrating long after the bow lifted. Maribel stood again, pacing now. She couldn't let this spiral. Image was everything. Control was survival. She tapped out a message to legal, then paused, deleting it. Too soon. Drawing attention would only confirm suspicion. Instead, she pulled up the staff directory and filtered by shift. Her gaze skimmed names she'd never cared to learn. Maintenance. Custodial. Contractors. Faces blurred together until one detail caught her eye. Single parent. Approved for flexible hours. Her throat tightened. "No," she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was denying anymore. coincidences happened. Talent diluted over time. A janitor playing a familiar tune didn't rewrite history, but her body remembered before her mind caught up. The way the melody had hollowed her chest. The way she'd frozen, exposed in front of people who were never supposed to see her falter. She closed the directory and locked her screen, breathing through the rising panic. Tonight would go on as planned. Speeches. Applause. Champagne. She would not be undone by a song. Below, the man checked his watch again. Almost time. He rested a hand on his daughter's shoulder, grounding himself the way he always did. The building hummed around them, unaware that two worlds were inching closer. The truth had slipped its leash. And Maribel Klein, for the first time in years, wasn't sure she could outrun it. The truck rolled out with a hiss of brakes releasing, leaving behind Diesel and quiet. He guided his daughter toward the far bench by the lockers, away from traffic, where the concrete held a little warmth. She sat, shoulders curled, metronome resting in her palm like a small animal. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, then shook her head. "It's loud today." "I know." He crouched, meeting her eyes. "Count with me." They listened together. Tick. Tock. The rhythm steadied her breathing, slowed the tremor in her fingers. He watched it happen the way he always did, amazed and terrified by how thin the line was between calm and overwhelm. Music wasn't a hobby in their life. It was a brace. A forklift beeped nearby. Someone shouted a number. The world kept moving. She glanced up. "That song! It was Mom's!" "Right." His chest tightened. He kept his voice even. She loved it. She said it was about telling the truth when it hurts. The words came carefully rehearsed. "Did you write it?" He hesitated. The truth pressed against his teeth. "I helped," he said finally. Her eyes widened, not with surprise but recognition. Like a puzzle piece clicking. "You always do." He smiled, small. Kids saw things adults trained themselves to miss. Footsteps approached, then slowed. Ruth Calder stopped a respectful distance away, tablet tucked under her arm. She watched the metronome for a beat before speaking. "Facilities said you might still be down here." He stood, posture easy. "Can I help you?" Ruth glanced at the girl, then back at him. "Just checking in." The lobbies. Stirred up. "Yeah," he said. "It does that." She huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. "That piece you played. Do you know how many people recognized it?" He met her gaze without flinching. "I figured a few might." Ruth studied him, weighing something. "It was retired. Officially, he echoed. Silence stretched. Somewhere above, an elevator chimed. Ruth's grip tightened on the tablet. "There are records," she said quietly. "Programs. Grants. Things that don't add up." He didn't ask which things. He didn't need names. The past lived close enough to touch. "I'm just here to work," he replied. "I know." Ruth nodded toward the girl. "And to take care of her." That acknowledgement softened something between them. Ruth straightened. "There's a gala tonight. Donors. Press. If this turns into noise, it'll be loud." He glanced down at his daughter. She was watching Ruth now, curious, unafraid. "Noise isn't always bad," he said. Ruth's mouth curved, almost a smile. "No, it isn't." She hesitated, then added, "If you need anything, I'm around." When she left, the space felt fuller, charged. The girl leaned closer. "Is she nice?" "She's fair," he said. "That counts." They sat together for a few minutes more. He told her a story about a violin that traveled across oceans in a suitcase, about hands that carried it through storms. He skipped the parts about rooms where decisions were made without listening. He always did. Above them, Maribel Klein stood at the edge of a rehearsal space she'd ordered cleared, staring at the same violin now resting on a velvet chair. A handler explained logistics. Security hovered. None of it reached her. She heard only the phrase that had undone her. She touched the case, then recoiled, as if burned. "Who played it?" she asked. "A custodian," someone said. "Day shift." Maribel's jaw set.
Find him.
Down below, a bell chimed on his watch. time. He stood, slung the cart strap, and offered his hand. The girl took it, metronome ticking between them. They headed for the service elevator, unaware of the line tightening, the rooms aligning. He felt it anyway, a pressure like weather changing. He'd spent years avoiding stages, avoiding eyes. He remembered the first time he'd played that melody in a room full of smiles, how applause had felt heavier than silence. Contracts had followed, then conditions, then warnings dressed as advice. He'd chosen differently, and the cost had arrived quietly, month by month. Still, he'd never regretted the choice. Looking at her now, steadying herself to the tick, he knew why. Whatever came next would pass through this building, through eyes and ledgers and fear. He would meet it standing, not as a performer, not as a ghost, but as a father who kept promises when they mattered most. He understood consequences and accepted them, knowing love was the only currency that survived storms, scandals, and time itself without apology or regret. But the truth had a way of finding open spaces. As the doors closed, he squeezed her hand once. "No matter what," he said, "we keep our rhythm." She smiled, brave and bright. "Always." The elevator rose. The elevator doors opened onto the service floor with a soft chime, releasing them into a quieter stretch of the building. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. He guided the cart forward, daughter close at his side, both of them moving with the practiced ease of people who knew how to stay out of the way. They didn't get far. "Excuse me." The voice was controlled, polished, used to stopping rooms. He turned slowly. Maribel stood a few paces back, flanked by security and an assistant clutching a tablet. Up close, the confidence was still there, but something beneath it strained, like glass under pressure. "You played the violin," she said. "Not a question." He glanced at the case in the assistant's hands, then back to her. "I picked it up." "And performed a restricted composition," she added. On company property, his shoulders remained loose. It was falling. Her eyes flicked to his uniform, then to the girl. "That instrument belongs to a donor." "You had no authorization." "I wasn't authorizing anything," he said evenly. "I was preventing damage." The assistant shifted. One of the guards cleared his throat. Maribel inhaled, steadying herself. "We need to discuss this privately." He shook his head. "I'm on shift. A beat." She wasn't used to that answer. "This won't take long." He met her gaze. Recognition sparked there now, undeniable. She saw it. The way his hands rested, the posture she remembered from rehearsal halls and meetings where she'd held all the leverage. "You know the piece," he said quietly. The words landed harder than accusation. Her jaw tightened. "It's not appropriate to—" "That song was retired," he continued, calm but precise, "along with the man who wrote it." Silence stretched, thick. The guards exchanged looks. The girl squeezed his hand once, grounding him. Maribel's voice dropped. "You shouldn't be here." He almost smiled. "Neither should lies." A door down the corridor opened. Ruth stepped out, eyes taking in the scene. Her expression sharpened, understanding clicking into place. "Is there a problem?" Ruth asked. Maribel straightened instantly. "No. Just handling a facilities issue." Ruth's gaze slid to the violin case. "That's not a mop." The girl spoke then, small but clear. "My mom said that song tells the truth." Everyone stilled. Maribel looked at her like she'd been struck. "Who are you? She's my daughter," he said. "And she knows when something's wrong." Ruth inhaled slowly. "Maribel," she said, carefully, "we need to talk." "Later," Maribel snapped. "Now," Ruth corrected. "People are already asking questions about the composition, about why it disappeared." Maribel's composure cracked, just enough. "This is inappropriate." "What's inappropriate," Ruth replied, "is pretending this is about policy." The corridor felt suddenly too small. Footsteps echoed as more staff slowed, drawn by tension they didn't fully understand. Witnesses gathered without meaning to. He spoke again, voice steady. "I don't want anything from you." Maribel's eyes flashed. "Then why do this?" He gestured gently toward the violin. "Because it fell." That did it. Something in her collapsed. The song, the witnesses, the child. It converged. She looked around, realizing too late that this wasn't contained. Ruth turned to him. "We should document this." He nodded once. "If you are feeling this moment tighten, subscribe and stay with us, because what happens next doesn't stay hidden." Maribel's phone buzzed. A message from legal lit the screen. She didn't look at it. Her gaze stayed locked on him, a mix of fear and something like shame. "You could have stayed gone," she said. "I tried," he answered. The girl tugged his sleeve. "Dad?" He knelt, eyes softening instantly. "It's okay." Ruth watched that exchange, something resolute settling in her posture. "I'll arrange a formal review," she said. "Tonight's gala will be interesting." Maribel laughed, brittle. "You think donors care about some old song?" Ruth met her stare. "I think they care about integrity." Security shifted, uncertain whose side they were on. The balance had changed. He stood, pushing the cart forward again. "We're done here." Maribel didn't stop him. She couldn't. Too many eyes now, too much unspoken truth vibrating like a string still ringing. As he walked away, the violin case remained between them, heavy with history. The discovery wasn't complete, but it had begun, public, irreversible, and impossible to clean away. Ruth led them into a narrow conference room off the service hall, shutting the door gently behind them. The air smelled of toner and coffee. He parked the cart by the wall, hands loose, heart steady, while Maribel remained standing, arms crossed, eyes sharp, already measuring exits silently without hesitation. Security waited outside, a reminder this wasn't private, just contained. Ruth set her tablet down and looked between them. The silence stretched, heavy with unsaid history. He felt the old discipline settle in. The kind learned in rooms where truth cost livelihoods and reputations were quietly dismantled by power alone. Maribel finally sat, smoothing her jacket like armor. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, voice controlled. "He said nothing." He'd learned silence unsettled powerful people more than accusations. Ruth watched closely, pen hovering, aware this moment balanced on documentation and courage and accountability pressing against old habits of erasure everywhere. Ruth outlined what she'd found: missing grant numbers, altered programs, emails archived too neatly. Each detail landed softly but accumulated weight. Maribel's composure tightened. He recognized the pattern, the slow unraveling when narratives met receipts. When authority realized money couldn't edit memory forever or silence witnesses already listening closely now. The girl sat on the floor, back against the wall, metronome ticking in her palm. The sound steadied him. He kept his eyes on her, reminding himself why he'd walked away before. This wasn't about restoring fame. It was about keeping promises made at hospital bedsides during long nights alone. Maribel leaned forward, lowering her voice. She spoke of risk, donors, survival. He listened, hearing echoes of old meetings. When she finished, he answered simply, stating dates and facts. Ruth's pen moved faster, the record taking shape beyond anyone's control as truth displaced fear inside the small room slowly now. Voices rose outside the door as word spread. Staff paused, pretending errands, listening anyway. The building felt porous. Maribel noticed and faltered. Public spaces made her careful. Exposure changed rules. He stayed calm, aware witnesses were becoming part of the story she'd tried burying for years. Unpaid, undocumented, unresolved truths. The assistant returned briefly with the violin case, setting it near the door. No one touched it. The object anchored everything, proof without speaking. He felt its presence like a pulse. Music had summoned this reckoning, and silence would not send it back into storage, vaults, or convenient forgetting again. Maribel's shoulders sagged a fraction. She glanced at the case, then at the girl. Something human flickered, quickly masked. "What do you want?" she asked. He shook his head. The answer wasn't transactional, and that frightened her more than demands, because power understood bargaining, not accountability before witnesses already gathering. Ruth closed her tablet, decision settled. She outlined next steps: audit, disclosures, and independent review. Her tone was procedural, unstoppable. The process itself became leverage. Maribel listened, calculating losses. He watched, knowing systems could finally work when guided by conscience instead of profit alone, fear, or convenience today, here, now. The meeting ended without ceremony. Doors opened. Eyes followed them as they stepped into the corridor. No one spoke, yet understanding rippled. He felt lighter and heavier simultaneously. Discovery was complete. Exposure was underway. And there would be no quiet way back for anyone who heard the song today already. He reached for the cart and his daughter's hand, grounding himself. Ahead, the building buzzed with anticipation and fear. Behind them, Marable stood framed by glass, diminished. The melody lingered everywhere, carrying truth forward, setting the stage for consequences no contract could contain as evening approached. Witnesses multiplied, resolve hardened. Outside, evening light slanted through windows, turning corridors amber. Messages pinged phones. Names circulated. He sensed momentum building beyond control. This was the dangerous part, when institutions resisted change. He stayed focused on the present step, the child beside him, the cart rolling steadily, quietly, without spectacle, intent intact always. Ruth walked with them briefly, offering logistics and support without fanfare. Her presence mattered. Allies rarely announced themselves. He thanked her with a nod. She returned it, understanding some battles required patience and daylight. The gala upstairs loomed, a stage finally vulnerable to truth and accountability beneath bright lights tonight. The girl looked up, sensing gravity but unafraid. "Are we okay?" she asked. He squeezed her hand once. "We are. Saying it made it true." Whatever followed would be faced together, measured in steps, breaths, and music that refused erasure despite pressure, threats, or rewritten narratives ahead, waiting, listening, ready. They moved on, unseen as ever, yet changed. Discovery had done its work. The next phase would demand courage from many, not just one janitor and his child. Above them, preparations continued, unaware that the building had already begun telling the truth in echoes, witnesses, records, memory, music, light glass. The corridor widened as they moved closer to the central elevators, the amber light fading into something brighter and more exposed. He felt it before he saw it, the shift in the building's energy. Conversations lowered as they passed. Phones were tucked away a little too quickly. People looked, then pretended they hadn't. The truth was traveling faster than he was. He guided the cart into its alcove and checked the schedule posted beside it. Nothing had changed on paper. Same floors, same tasks. But the air carried a thin current of anticipation like a room before a storm breaks. The gala upstairs was only hours away, and the building was dressing itself for spectacle while quietly bracing for impact. His daughter stayed close, her hand slipping into his without asking. The metronome was silent now, resting in her pocket, its work done for the moment. He noticed how she watched faces, learning something about adults she hadn't needed to learn so young. "You're not invisible anymore," she said softly. He glanced down, surprised. "I was never invisible to you." She nodded, accepting that, then added, "They see you now." He didn't answer. Being seen had never been the goal. It was simply a consequence. An elevator dinged, doors opening to spill out a cluster of staff in tailored jackets and name badges. They paused when they saw him. One of them, a man he'd nodded to for years without learning his name, offered a tentative smile. "That was something," the man said, awkward but sincere. He returned the smile. "Just a song." The man shook his head like he knew better and moved on. Others followed, whispers trailing behind them. The story was taking shape in pieces, assembled by people who'd felt the tension even if they didn't yet understand it. Several floors above, Marable stood in a temporary staging room lined with mirrors and garment racks. A stylist hovered, unsure whether to continue adjusting the gown draped over her shoulders. The reflection staring back looked composed, powerful. But the cracks were there if you knew where to look. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. "Yes," she said sharply. "I know." A pause. Her jaw clenched. "No. We don't cancel. That would look worse." Another pause, longer. Her gaze flicked to the door, to the hallway beyond where staff moved with careful distance now. "I said handle it," she snapped, then ended the call. She pressed her palms together, nails biting into skin. The audit was already circulating. Ruth had moved faster than expected. Donors were asking questions, polite ones, dangerous ones. The melody still echoed, uncontainable. For the first time, Maribel wondered if she'd underestimated what it meant to erase a life. Not legally. Morally. Back on the service floor, he finished his assigned tasks with the same care he always did. Trash emptied. Surfaces wiped. Small order restored where it could be. The routine steadied him, kept his thoughts from spiraling ahead. Ruth crossed his path near the stairwell, slowing just enough to speak. "Press is sniffing around," she said quietly. "Internal? For now?" He nodded. "I figured. They'll want statements." "I won't hide," he replied. "But I won't perform either." A hint of a smile touched her face. That might be the most powerful stance. She moved on, already fielding another call. He watched her go, grateful for allies who understood restraint. The girl tugged his sleeve. "Will she be mad?" He considered the question carefully. "She already is. Will she hurt us?" "No," he said, firmer now. "She can't. Not like before." The certainty surprised him as much as it reassured her. Once truth was public, power had limits. As evening crept closer, the building transformed. Music piped through speakers upstairs. Catering carts rolled past, fragrant and extravagant. The contrast was almost absurd. Celebration layered over consequence. They paused near a window overlooking the city. Lights flickered on, one by one, like a constellation forming. He rested a hand on the glass, feeling its cool solidity. Years ago, he'd looked out from stages like this, believing success meant safety. He'd learned differently. Safety came from walking away when it mattered, from choosing a child over applause, from holding on to a song even when no one was listening. Now, people were listening again. An announcement chimed softly, reminding staff of restricted areas during the event. He guided the cart away, steering toward spaces meant for labor, not leadership. That rule still held. Power hadn't invited him in. It wouldn't need to. The victory wasn't about a confrontation yet. It was about pressure building, narratives colliding, witnesses aligning. The exposure had begun. Now it had to mature, to become undeniable. He felt the weight of it settle, not fear, but responsibility. Once truth surfaced, it demanded care. He owed that to himself, to his daughter, to everyone who'd been quietly erased and told it was necessary. As they moved toward the exit, the sound of rehearsal music drifted down the stairwell, bright and hollow. He knew that sound well, knew how quickly it faded once the lights went out. The girl leaned into his side. "I like when you play," she said. "Even when it's quiet." He squeezed her shoulder. "Me too." They stepped into the evening air, the building glowing behind them, alive with preparation and unease. Tomorrow would be louder. Tonight was about holding steady, letting the truth gather strength on its own terms. The song had opened the door. Now the world would have to walk through it. They didn't go far. Just across the plaza, where the glass facade reflected the city back at itself and the noise softened into traffic and wind. He sat on the low stone edge, setting the cart beside him, and let the moment breathe. The building behind them glowed brighter as dusk deepened, every light a signal that something important was about to happen upstairs. His daughter swung her legs, restless now that the tension had eased a notch. "Are we waiting?" she asked. "For a bit," he said. "Sometimes things need space before they move." She accepted that, pulling the metronome from her pocket and winding it once. Tick! Tock! The sound blended with the city, small but persistent. Across the plaza, staff informal where crossed back and forth, badges flashing under lights. Snippets of conversation drifted over. Words like audit, donor, statement. No one used names yet, but they didn't have to. The shape of the story was clear enough. Ruth emerged from the revolving doors, scanning the plaza until she spotted them. She crossed over, heels clicking softly, expression focused but calmer than before. "It's gaining traction," she said without preamble. "Internal comms lit up after legal circulated the preliminary findings." He nodded. "And her?" Ruth exhaled. "She's holding the line." "For now." "That won't last. he said, not with satisfaction, just certainty. Ruth studied him for a moment. You could still walk away, she said. You've done enough to trigger accountability. He looked at his daughter, then back at the building. If I walk away now, it turns into a rumor. A scandal people forget once the next one arrives. Ruth didn't argue. She knew he was right. What do you need? She asked. He considered. A record. Somewhere public. Something that connects the song to what was taken. Ruth nodded slowly. There are programs. Old recordings. We can't erase them all. No, he agreed. You just need one. She made a note on her phone. I'll see what I can do before tonight. As she turned to leave, she paused. You know this won't be kind. He met her gaze. It was never kind before either. She left, blending back into the flow of staff and guests. The plaza felt quieter after she was gone, like the world was holding its breath. If you want to see how this plays out when power finally meets proof, subscribe and stay with me, because the next steps happen where everyone's watching. The girl leaned against him. Are they going to hear you play again? He smiled faintly. Maybe. Will you be scared, probably? She nodded, satisfied with the honesty. You're brave when you're scared. That landed deeper than applause ever had. He watched the building, remembering other nights like this. Benefits, galas, rooms full of polished smiles. He'd stood under lights once, believing music could change minds. He still believed it, just differently now. Music didn't persuade power. It revealed it. A hush fell as black cars began pulling up. Donors arrived, laughter spilling onto the plaza, champagne already flowing somewhere inside. The contrast tightened his chest. Celebration layered over consequence again. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Is this? The voice trailed off uncertain. This is the man from earlier. Yes, he said. A pause. I found something, the voice said. An old recording. It's your composition. It was supposed to be destroyed. He closed his eyes briefly. Where is it? Uploaded to a private archive, the voice replied. But it won't stay private for long. Thank you, he said. When the call ended, he felt the weight shift. This was it. The preparation phase was almost complete. Evidence, witnesses, timing. The victory strategy wasn't about force. It was about alignment. He stood, straightening his jacket, and took a slow breath. The girl stood with him, slipping her hand into his. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. They moved toward the service entrance, not the main doors. Power never expected resistance from the side passages. That's where labor flowed, where truth slipped in unnoticed until it was too late to stop. Inside, the music upstairs swelled. Rehearsed, perfect, hollow. Guests gathered. Glasses clinked. Somewhere above, Maribel Klein smiled and shook hands, believing she still controlled the narrative. He felt no anger now. Just focus. The plan wasn't revenge. It was exposure. Let the song meet the record. Let the past speak for itself. Let witnesses draw their own conclusions. As they reached the corridor, he glanced down at his daughter. No matter what happens, he said softly, you remember this part. The part where you didn't look away? She asked. He nodded. She squeezed his hand. I won't forget. Behind them, the plaza emptied. Ahead, the building waited, bright and fragile. The truth was ready. All that remained was the moment it would be heard. The service corridor swallowed them again, familiar and narrow, its walls marked by years of unnoticed work. He preferred it this way. Side passages carried less noise, fewer assumptions. The gala's music bled faintly through vents above, polished and rehearsed, a soundtrack to comfort and denial. They stopped near a utility junction where cables disappeared into ceilings no one ever looked up at. He set the cart aside and crouched, checking the access panel with the same care he'd once reserved for tuning pegs. Everything had its place. Everything responded to patience. His phone vibrated again. A message this time. A secure link. No words, just the archive access Ruth had promised. He didn't open it yet. Timing mattered. Truth without witnesses became trivia. Truth delivered at the wrong moment got buried again. His daughter leaned against the wall, watching him with a seriousness that felt older than her years. "Are you thinking loud things again?" she asked. He smiled, despite himself. "Yeah, good loud or bad loud?" "Important loud." She nodded, satisfied. She understood importance. It was the thing adults pretended not to feel until it demanded attention. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor. He straightened instinctively, body remembering old reflexes. A catering worker passed, pushing a cart piled with linen, eyes forward, unaware of how close, she moved to a fault line. When the echoes faded, he finally tapped the link. The screen filled with metadata first. Dates, locations, a venue he hadn't seen in years. His throat tightened. He clicked again. Sound poured through his phone speaker, tinny but unmistakable. His melody. Younger hands, surer, unscarred by compromise. Applause followed, faint but real, a crowd that had believed once. He turned the volume down quickly. This wasn't nostalgia. This was evidence. He forwarded the link to Ruth with a single line. "This is it." Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared. Then, "I see it." He exhaled slowly. The preparation was complete. Now came the waiting. Above them, the gala reached full stride. Laughter rose and fell. A string quartet played something pleasant and forgettable. Guests clustered beneath chandeliers, confident in the assumption that tonight would end like all the others, with praise, photos, and nothing truly challenged. Maribel stood at the center of it, glass raised, smile practiced. From the outside, she looked untouchable again. Only those close enough noticed how often her gaze drifted toward exits, how her laughter landed a fraction late. A donor leaned in. "Heard there was some drama earlier," he said lightly. She waved it off. "Facilities issue. You know how these buildings are." The donor chuckled. "Always something beneath the surface. If only he knew." Back in the corridor, he felt the weight of the moment settle fully. This wasn't just about exposing her. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken quietly, justified by spreadsheets and whispered concerns about risk. He remembered the meeting where it ended. The careful words. The way she'd avoided his eyes even then. He'd walked out carrying his violin case like a body, knowing the world he'd trained for no longer wanted him. He hadn't fought it. He'd chosen differently. That choice stood beside him now, small hand in his, steady and brave. "What happens if they don't listen?" she asked. He considered it honestly. "Then we keep telling the truth, louder." "With proof," she nodded. "Like counting." "Exactly." Ruth's footsteps approached, faster this time. She appeared at the corridor entrance, face set with purpose. "It's ready," she said. "We've cued it into the presentation system. Once it plays, there's no stopping it." He absorbed that. No stopping it. The words carried weight and relief. "And Maribel?" he asked. Ruth's expression softened, just a fraction. "She knows something's coming. She just doesn't know when." He looked down at his daughter. "You okay to stay here with Ruth for a bit?" She hesitated, then nodded. "You'll be back," he smiled. "Always." Ruth crouched to her level. "I'll keep her safe," she said, and meant it. He handed Ruth the phone, the archive link still glowing on the screen. "Make sure they know where it came from," he said. "Not for credit. For context." Ruth nodded. "Witnesses matter." As he turned toward the stairwell leading up. Not to the stage, but to the edge of it. His pulse quickened. This was the closest he'd come to that world in years. Not as a performer. As proof. He climbed slowly, each step deliberate. Sounds grew clearer. Applause rippled. Glass clinked. The hum of wealth and certainty vibrated through the rail. At the landing, he paused, hand resting on the cool metal. He wasn't angry. He wasn't afraid. He felt resolved. The victory wouldn't come from confrontation alone. It would come from alignment, song, record, witnesses, timing, public exposure, clean and undeniable. He straightened his jacket, squared his shoulders, and waited for the cue Ruth had promised. Above him, the microphone tapped once, testing. The room settled, and the truth prepared to speak. The microphone's soft tap cut through the hum like a held breath. Conversations tapered, glasses lowered, bodies angled toward the stage out of habit. He stood just beyond the curtain line, not visible yet, listening to the room settle into a tension it believed it controlled. Ruth's voice came first, calm, procedural. She thanked donors, acknowledged partners, spoke of transparency and stewardship. Words people liked to hear because they sounded reassuring. Maribel stood near the front, smile fixed, shoulders squared, nodding at the right moments. She looked composed, luminous under the lights. Then Ruth shifted. "Before we continue," she said, "we need to address a matter of record." A ripple moved through the crowd, subtle but real. He felt it through the wall, a vibration like the first note before a melody resolves. Ruth continued, outlining dates, a program discontinued without explanation, a composition removed from archives. Names weren't spoken yet, but the shape was unmistakable. Maribel's smile thinned. "And to provide context," Ruth said, "we're going to play an excerpt." The room hushed further as the speakers crackled. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the sound emerged. Older, thinner, but unmistakably alive. His melody filled the space, familiar and dangerous, curling through the chandeliers and into the crowd's chest. Murmurs rose. Heads turned. A donor frowned, then leaned toward a neighbor. Someone whispered a name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. Maribel went still. The color drained from her face as recognition struck, undeniable now. She looked around, searching for control, for a lever to pull. There was none. The record played on, immune to interruption. Ruth spoke again over the music. This recording was archived, not destroyed, despite representations to the contrary. The lights shifted slightly, exposing more of the room. He stepped forward then, not onto the stage, but into the aisle, visible enough. Eyes followed him, curiosity snapping into focus as recognition spread. "That's him," someone breathed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The music carried everything he might have said. Maribel turned fully now, gaze locking onto him. For a moment, something like apology flickered. Then fear took over. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Power failed her when it mattered most. The recording ended. Silence fell, heavier than applause. Ruth let it linger. "We've initiated an independent audit," she said. "Full findings will be released." A hand shot up. Then another. Questions spilled out, sharp and insistent. Cameras appeared, phones raised, red lights blinking. The gala had transformed into a hearing. Maribel found her voice at last. "This is inappropriate," she said, strained. This event," Ruth cut in, "is about accountability." The word landed like a verdict. He felt eyes on him from every direction. He met them steadily, not defiant, not pleading, just present. He thought of the corridor, the cart, the metronome ticking his daughter back into calm. He thought of why he'd come. A reporter pushed forward. "Did you authorize the recording?" "No," he said simply. The word echoed, clear and final. "Why now?" another asked. "Because it fell," he replied, and something in the room shifted again. Maribel stepped toward him, stopping short as security hesitated, unsure whose orders mattered any more. "You could have come to me," she said, voice low, almost desperate. "I did," he answered quietly. "Years ago," the crowd murmured, pieces aligning. Context bloomed where there had been confusion. Ruth signaled to security, not to remove him but to maintain space. The difference was not lost on anyone. A donor cleared his throat. "We deserve answers," he said, louder than intended. "Yes," Ruth agreed. "You do." The room buzzed, questions overlapping, outrage mixing with embarrassment. Sponsors exchanged glances. Some faces hardened, others softened. He felt a strange calm settle over him. The exposure was complete. Not explosive, not theatrical, just undeniable. The record, the witnesses, the timing, it held. Maribel stood very still, isolated now despite the crowd. The song had done what money couldn't undo. It had told the truth in public, and there was no erasing that. He stepped back, retreating into the aisle shadows as the storm took on a life of its own. This part wasn't his anymore. It belonged to the room, to the systems forced to respond. As he moved away, applause began, Not thunderous, uncertain, but real. It followed him briefly, then shifted toward Ruth as she continued outlining next steps. He didn't turn back. Down the corridor, away from the lights, he found his daughter waiting with Ruth. Her eyes were wide, shining. "Did they hear it?" she asked. He knelt, meeting her gaze. "They did," she smiled, the kind that reached her shoulders. "Good." Above them, the gala dissolved into consequence. Below, he held on to the only victory that mattered. The truth had been heard. The corridor felt quieter than before, as if the building itself had exhaled. He stayed kneeling for a moment, hand resting on his daughter's back, grounding them both while the noise upstairs fractured into overlapping voices and hurried footsteps. Ruth straightened, already slipping into motion. "Security's shifting," she said calmly. "Legal's on site. Press will follow protocols now, not spin." He nodded, absorbing it without relief or triumph. This phase had never been about winning. It was about ending something that should have ended years ago. They walked together toward the exit, passing staff who no longer pretended not to see him. Some nodded. One woman whispered thank you under her breath. A man looked away, shame flickering across his face like he'd benefited from silence and only just noticed. Outside, the night air felt cool and honest. Sirens murmured somewhere distant. Camera lights flared near the front entrance, reporters clustering as guests spilled out in uneven groups, gala attire suddenly ill-suited to the moment. Maribel emerged moments later, flanked by advisors. Her posture was rigid, face set in practiced composure, but the illusion had thinned. When she saw him, she slowed. "Wait," she said. Ruth glanced at him, silent question in her eyes. He answered with a small nod and stepped forward, leaving his daughter with her. They stood a few feet apart, no stage between them now. Just concrete and night. "I didn't think it would come back like this," Maribel said quietly. He studied her, searching for the woman who'd once spoken about art and risk with genuine passion before power narrowed everything. "It never left," he replied. "You just stopped listening." Her gaze dropped. "I told myself it was necessary. Most people do," he said. "That's how it works." She swallowed, the crowd's murmur pressing in. "I can't undo it." "No," he agreed, "but you can stop defending it." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, her shoulders lowered. "The board will remove me," she said. "Not a plea. A fact. That's between you and them." She nodded once, accepting it. "Your daughter," she said, glancing past him. "She shouldn't have had to see this." He turned to look at her, standing steady beside Ruth, unafraid. She saw the truth, he said. "That matters." Maribel closed her eyes briefly, then straightened as an advisor whispered urgently in her ear. When she looked back, the arrogance was gone, replaced by something quieter and far more human. "I'm sorry," she said. The words were unpolished, unstrategized. He didn't respond. Apologies weren't currency. Actions were. She stepped away, swallowed by cameras and questions, her power dissolving in real time. He returned to his daughter, lifting her easily. She wrapped her arms around his neck, resting her head against his shoulder like she always did when things were finally calm. "Are we going home?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "We are." Ruth walked them to the curb. "This won't be clean," she warned gently. "There will be reports, hearings, fallout." "I know, but you won't be alone." He met her eyes, gratitude settling deep. "Neither will you." She smiled, small and tired. "Go. I'll call tomorrow." As they waited for the bus, he watched the building one last time. Lights still burned on upper floors where decisions would now be questioned, revised, corrected. It wasn't justice yet. But it was movement. The bus arrived with a hiss, doors opening like an invitation back to ordinary life. He stepped on, nodding to the driver, and found a seat near the back. The city slid past in streaks of light and shadow. His daughter pulled the metronome from her pocket and set it ticking softly between them. Tick. Tock. The sound was steady, familiar, safe. "Will you play again?" she asked after a while. He thought about it. About rooms without fear. About music without conditions. "Someday," he said. "When it's right." She smiled, already half asleep. I like when you wait for the right time. He rested his chin against her hair, watching the city carry them forward. The past had finally loosened its grip. The truth was out in the open, messy and real, where it belonged. Tomorrow would bring questions, consequences, change. Tonight there was just the rhythm of the bus, the ticking metronome, and the quiet certainty that dignity, once reclaimed, didn't fade again. Morning arrived without ceremony. Pale light slipped through the apartment blinds, landing on the small table where the metronome sat, finally still. He woke before his daughter, as he always did, listening to the city stretch awake. Buses sighing, footsteps passing, life continuing as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. He made coffee, the cheap kind that smelled stronger than it tasted, and stood by the window. The news played softly from a neighbor's television through the wall. Words like investigation, resignation, independent review drifted in fragments. Names followed. Hers among them. His was mentioned too, briefly, without embellishment. Just facts. That felt right. The girl padded in, hair tangled, eyes clear. She climbed onto a chair and watched him pour cereal. "They're still talking about it," she said. "They will for a while." "Is that bad?" "No," he said. "It's how things change." She considered that. Spoon paused midair. "Do they know you're the janitor?" He smiled. "They know I clean things." That satisfied her. She ate, humming softly under her breath, not the melody from the lobby but something new, something lighter. He listened, feeling a quiet pride settle where old grief had lived. Later, they walked to school together. Parents nodded. One teacher squeezed his arm gently, saying nothing. The girl skipped ahead, backpack bouncing, unburdened. He watched her disappear through the doors before turning back toward the street. His phone buzzed. A message from Ruth. Just 2 lines. The board meeting was scheduled. Reforms were already being drafted. "Thank you." He typed back 1 word. Anytime. Work still waited. It always would. He caught the bus, took his seat near the back, and rode through neighborhoods that had never known his name and never needed to. At the building, security nodded him through, different now. Respect without spectacle. He did his job. Floors gleamed. Trash disappeared. Order returned in small, meaningful ways. People passed, some smiling, some awkward, all aware they were walking through a place that had been forced to remember itself. At lunch, he sat alone and ate a sandwich wrapped in paper. No calls came. No offers. That was fine. He hadn't done this to be elevated. He'd done it to be whole. In the afternoon, someone left a violin case by the supply room door. No note. Just the case. He stared at it for a long moment, then carried it inside and set it gently on the shelf. Not yet. Some things needed time. When his shift ended, he picked up his daughter and they walked home under a sky clearing after rain. She talked about math and a book she wanted to read. Normal things. Precious things. At home, he helped with homework, made dinner, listened. Afterward, she pulled out the metronome and wound it once, letting it tick while she colored. "Dad," she said suddenly, "are you glad the violin fell?" He thought about the marble floor, the laughter, the silence afterward. "Yes," he said. "I am." "Me too," she replied, and went back to coloring. That night, when she slept, he opened the case. The violin rested inside, unchanged. He lifted it, tuned it slowly, carefully. He played 1 note. Then another. Quiet. Just for himself. The sound filled the small room, not demanding anything, not asking permission. Somewhere, consequences were unfolding. Careers reshaping. Systems adjusting under pressure they could no longer ignore. He didn't watch. He didn't need to. He set the violin down and closed the case. Dignity, he'd learned, wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It showed up when someone chose not to look away, when a child learned that truth mattered more than comfort, when power learned. Too late. That memory couldn't be bought. Before you go, tell me the next story title you want me to write. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Play This Piano, I'll Marry You. Billionaire mocked black janitor until he played like Mozart. Trust me, you'll feel it. and tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?